You know, I kind of liked this episode. I'm going to tear it apart a bit because it's real sloppy in some places and it leaves some really big questions and we're going to have fun with it all. But I will say, overall, I enjoyed watching the episode, in large part because of the development of Talos, Ben Mendelsohn's so good, who finally stood up for himself to Fury after 30 frickin' years. Whew! We'll dive into all of that in a minute, but first, as always, particularly with a show as slow as this one, let's talk about the big headlines. And sure enough, we have some. Rhodey is a Skrull. That's clearly his voice on the phone with Vara. Sorry, Vara, not Laura. She's still getting credited as Priscilla in the end credits. It's very frustrating. But she is working with Gravik. Hell hath no fury, like a Mrs. Fury scorned. Ooh, we'll talk about her too. Plus, earlier in this episode, though, when it comes to Rhodey, Fury said that he's heard there's a Skrull high up in the U.S. government, and it doesn't get much higher than Rhodey, who literally has the ear of the president. And I don't think Gaia is dead, by the way, at least not yet. Earlier in the episode, we see Gravik has already turned himself into a Super Skrull. And he said it too! He said Super Skrull! I'm surprised he didn't turn to the camera and wink. But he used the Extremis ability to heal after Talos impaled his hand with a butter knife. Ooh, but what will heal Gravik's ego? He's like, can I change my DNA to have super self-confidence? So I suspect that Gaia secretly Super Skrulled herself as well. I don't know how she was able to do it. That makes no sense to me. You'd think they'd be able to tell if the machine had been turned on. And how was it left unattended to a degree that it could be turned on, which I'm sure is somewhat noisy, and someone could Super Skrull themselves. But anyway, oh, by the way, even if Gravik had just not shot her, to kill, if he had not done a kill shot, it's pretty easy for a Skrull to play dead even if they haven't been Super Skrulled, right? Just shift into your natural state and lie still. They don't check. Nobody checks. They're like, oh, they turned green. Must be dead. I'm like, you check for a pulse or something? Thankfully for everyone who's trying to get away from them, the Skrull army never learned to double tap. Also, let's look out for this woman because they made a point of showing her, right? In Skrull cold storage. I was like, who is that? She looked vaguely familiar. So, I don't think she's been in the MCU. I asked a couple of people I know. They were like, well, I don't know who that is. But I was like, she's clearly been put in the camera frame, so maybe she's going to show up in an episode or two. And it'll be like, oh! But I don't think they did it obvious enough that enough people will notice. All right, so anyway. And Gravik tried to start World War III unsuccessfully. He's so unsuccessful in almost everything that, I guess the thing at the beginning in episode 1 worked out, but the show made it seem smaller than the show then said it was. All right, so this time he was going to have a UK sub shoot down a UN plane. I don't know why they just didn't get the plane not to take off. Why were they focused, Fury and Talos and Sonya, why were they so focused on the sub? I'd be like, just have the plane never take off, So anyway, but they did. So I would assume, by the way, that there are protocols in place in case a commanding officer, even if they're human, goes off the deep end and gives a command that seems to make no sense. But on this show, no. They're like, and just because that other guy was like, we have to do it, I'd be like, I'm sorry, buddy, but I'm running this up the flagpole because it's going to start World War III. So apparently you can't double check orders no matter how insane they are, or that other human soldier also has very low self-confidence and and really succumbs to peer pressure. Also, why not just replace, by the way, both of the people who have to turn the key to launch the missile with Skrulls? Why just replace one of them? Were they getting some kind of sick pleasure and willing to risk the success of the mission by having to convince the human to turn the key and destroy their own civilization and race? I was like, why didn't we get this guy? And I was so upset they didn't show them shift into those people. They gave them the files. I was like, you're not going to all shift in the car? And they were like, nope, we're going to shift on a camera cut. We're not even going to try and show you the shift. Same with Talos walking behind that column. I was like, you guys suck. Your budget is that low? All right, so who is the worst leader, Gravik or Talos? Share your own thoughts down below. Here are mine. I do agree, to be fair, we're putting all our cards on the table here, that after 30 years, Talos has done more to help Fury than his own people. And I think the fact that Talos doesn't have as I've said before, a single Skrull friend or co-worker left. They don't even have to be friends. Just someone who's still working with him. Even though he was once, and it seems was up until recently, their military leader. It's odd. I'd be like, Talos, why don't you have any Skrull friends? Or again, just people that you know who are still on our side. Gravik, Talos makes it seem like not every Skrull is following Gravik, but I'm like, I don't see anybody behind you, Talos, like ever. His daughter's his daughter did switch allegiances, but he lured her back. And while Gravik seems to have played on Skrull desperation and amassed a lot of power and followers, just like a lot of humans have throughout history, his lack of self-control is stunning. I guess he acted out in the museum that way because he knew everyone else around them was a Skrull. But then why didn't that tip off Talos? Why wasn't he like, keep your voice down? Oh, wait, is everyone in here a Skrull? I love seeing extras being asked to act. And you can tell that some of them just aren't up to the task, unfortunately. They're like, angrily get out of your seat. And they're like, that's the best they're going to do. All right, so I was like, if you need extras to be that engaged, you have to hire actors as extras and just pay them more if you have to. And since everyone inside the cafeteria, at least, was a Skrull, what undercover Skrull waiter or busboy gave Talos a butter knife to begin with? They were having coffee. You don't need a knife with coffee. If that's what I'd be saying if I were Gravik. I was like, why is there even a butter knife on the table? To me, I think Gravik, though, is the worst leader because he only cares, not even about himself, he cares about his cause. That makes him very dangerous, but I also think a very poor leader because he doesn't care about his people at all. But Talos, on the flip side, interestingly, he cares very much. And I think, in fact, one of his weaknesses is that sometimes he cares too much. That's why Fury is a good team member for him because they really balance each other out, right? As we see later on in this episode. But while Talos might be a shadow of his former self, he still got some gas left in the tank. For instance, I didn't think he had any moves left against Gravik, but then he made that threat to take away the element of surprise by revealing the Skrull's existence to the governments of the world. I thought that was pretty good. I was like, ooh, that might work. That might work, Talos. Get on the old Rolodex. But then as I thought about it more after the episode and to do my notes, I was like, wait a minute, that makes no sense. Sonia Falsworth, for instance, she's a high operative in the UK spy organization. She knows about the Skrulls. The Russians know, do the Russians know? Well, at the very least, the UK has been confirmed by the show to know about the Skrulls. So it's not just Nick Fury. And over the course of 30 years, especially with the Skrulls clearly, or at least many of them, so unhappy in their relationship with Fury, you're telling me that not one of them, especially as more and more came onto the planet, they didn't try to defect to another government to see if they could get a better offer for their services or offer their services to anyone with power? I mean, from, not even people like just regular powerful civilians, but what about all the criminal organizations in the world? I think a Skrull could do pretty good for themselves. So I think that people would kind of know. I think there would have been whispers all this time. I mean, with all the conspiracy theories on the internet, this never came up. There's no Skrull, by the way, on the internet talking and giving away the secret. So, I mean, I think that some Skrull would have done something. And I think that people would be, any country or person would be very receptive. So, I mean, even Rhodey, by the way, said that he had attended a top secret briefing a while back that discussed the possibilities of Skrulls being on the planet, right? Now, sure, that was Skrull Rhodey who disclosed that, and maybe he was just trying to, get Fury to stop. But also maybe that was a real meeting that happened that Skrull Rhodey had pulled from Rhodey's memories. So I think it's impossible that after 30 years, especially when we've already proven that one other person knows, Sonia, that people don't know about Skrulls. And if they do, why is nobody questioning all these very bizarre situations? I mean, even if they didn't think it was a Skrull, when that really, really weird command came down, why weren't they like, maybe our communications have been hacked? But I really love Talos' scenes this episode, in large part because Ben Mendelsohn is such a charismatic actor who can add great depth to his work. And I love that curl he has with his hair in the front. Fabulous. When it got a little messed up when they tussled, I was like, oh, you messed up his hair. When he and Gravik discussed that painting, this is the kind of stuff I really like. Now, I agree with Gravik that it's a problem that leaders are no longer on the battlefield with the soldiers that they send there. Wonder Woman also has an issue with this. It's a good point. But diplomacy is important. It's how wars are ended throughout time, like almost all the time. There's always some kind of surrender that's eventually negotiated. And hopefully it minimizes bloodshed. Diplomacy is very crucial. Talos, wiser and with more experience, knows this. Although we've never seen Talos try diplomacy himself. Maybe that's how he views his friendship with Nick Fury and why he won't give up on it, right? Because when Fury asks why Talos didn't side with Gravik when Gravik made the offer before the show even started, so because when they're talking, that other impersonated Skrull is like, you could have joined Gravik when you had the chance, and Fury was like, what now? Tell me something I don't know. Thank you very much. And so Fury said, make me understand. And Talos said, I'm not with Gravik because I'm with you. And I'm like, that doesn't make me understand, Talos. Fury has never done anything for Talos after their initial deal, and he hasn't even lived up to the initial deal. So why does Talos have such allegiance to him? Perhaps having a human for a friend, even if it's a friendship that's not evenly balanced, gives Talos hope for peace between Skrull and humans. He has said that's his dream. Also, they do have a history. They have a history, and perhaps Talos is well, we know he's overly sentimental. I loved Talos pointing out, though, and us finally getting confirmation that the Skrulls have been Fury's secret weapon all along, that they were responsible for Fury becoming a spy master and moving up the ranks at S.H.I.E.L.D., thanks to the work done by the Skrulls. I thought that was great. And what a secret weapon to have. Very clever, Fury, but you think you would have taken better care of him. Everybody knows to take care of your sources. And I'm surprised someone as smart and as competent and capable as Fury would not know that. But only if we'd gotten to see some of that with flashbacks. Oh, man, I think that would have given the show even more depth and some much-needed action. And also, spy work's not that expensive. You can shift behind as many columns and cuts as you want. I'll take it. Also, how can you talk about Fury's forgotten children and not talk about his favorite children? Again, I've said this before, and I think it's evident every episode. The lack of Avengers on this show, if not the team, then how about the former members, continues to hold the show back. And why didn't he ever make himself known to any of the Avengers? Was he afraid that some of the Avengers, he couldn't trust them and they would raise the alarm against the Skrulls? But you know who I think would have gotten it? And tell me who you think. If you were Talos, who would you have reached out to if you wanted to, make a connection with the Avengers, right? I would have reached out to Natasha. I think she would have gotten it because of her own clandestine experience and how much red she had in her own ledger. I think she would have totally gotten it. And I think she would have understood what the Skrulls were going through. I think she would have loved having them as an asset herself. And you're telling me like the Black Widow program didn't somehow hear about Skrulls? But anyway, after Fury and Carol Danvers abandoned them, if I were Talos, I definitely would have reached out to an Avenger. And I think Natasha would have been a perfect example. And how great would it have been for her to be able to be part of this story? Scarlett Johansson, talk about not getting respect. All right, so I really loved seeing Talos stand up for himself, and Varys stood up for herself too. But what is her exact relationship with Fury? We learned this episode, it's been going on for a while, but is she his wife, or are they playing some kind of kinky game? This is Disney+, but I don't know. I think it's already in slightly kinky territory. If so, how could he abandon her again, intentionally this time, as she points out, after he came back from the blip? I mean, that was a really horrible thing to do. I'm like, that's pretty bad. And also, though, on the flip side, how could she even fathom killing him if they had so many good years before that? There's more going on here than we still know. And we have 3 episodes left. But Talos, as I said, good for him, because I think he's clearly in an abusive relationship of sorts with Fury. What Fury's doing, not cool. I thought that finally Talos stood up and articulated himself very well, very fairly. It's unusual for people to be able to express themselves so well. Maybe that's why it took Talos so long. He finally had to find the words, but he found them. And I was so happy that Talos is such a great guy. He didn't tear Fury down. He just wanted Fury to acknowledge the things that Fury was willfully ignoring. Talos just wanted credit and appreciation where they were due. And I loved watching Talos work. From the clever phone drop outside the museum, fun spy stuff, that Talos didn't miss a beat. He wasn't like, what are you talking about? That's not my phone. He's like, and he goes like, oh, wink. You know, he was like, oh yeah, thanks. To that touching moment when he saw that commander's human son in the house as well. I thought that was beautiful. A lot better than the touching moment from his daughter, Gaia, which we'll discuss in a moment. But you know what occurred to me? With all the guards out front being Skrulls, I don't know why they didn't think that maybe the son was also replaced and was a Skrull as well. And also, where was the commander's wife, by the way? That's such sloppy writing. If you mention the wife, and I didn't appreciate that jab at the commander's poor wife, I'm sure she's lovely, but why even reference her if you're not going to show her, right? Or why not be like, when they're like, yeah, she sure is annoying. Good thing she's away visiting her mother or something. You know, like, if you just mentioned her, I assume she's in the house as well. They were like, we can't afford a wife. Just leave us alone. And back to Gaia, when she had to get the code word to stop the launch, scrubbing through the real commander's memories, I was like, too much personal stuff. Where are his work memories? Get out of this section. But because like all I got was that the commander clearly loved his son. So I mean, I was like, oh yeah, don't hurt the son. He's a very nice guy. But I don't know how Gaia then took that to mean that that was the code word. I was like, I didn't see him being like, I shall use my son's name as a code word, right? What if he also had a favorite food? I mean, why would you just take that as being the code word? And wouldn't that be easy for any enemy to guess, even if they didn't have access to his memories? I think the UK government would have code word rules like many organizations have for password rules for their websites. Like, you can't use family member names, no birth dates. And then back to Talos again. I enjoyed seeing him work this episode alongside Fury. They do make a really good team. And again, I would have loved to have seen that a little bit, right? Why can't we see some of the good times? As Talos I think softens Fury a little bit, which is needed, but Talos doesn't have Fury's edge. So that's great. And Fury seemed a little bit more like his regular self this episode, which I enjoyed. I liked the way he kept calling the commander Bob. That was fun. I liked it. It was very Pulp Fiction a little bit. And I thought it was very funny. But it felt more natural than the way he was talking to the bomb builder in episode 1. I like that. I think Fury's had really good Fury moments each episode. I like the thing about, you only get to tell one lie with me. And then last episode, tell me something I don't know. I thought was a great game. And so the Bob stuff was fun too. I liked that. And speaking of Fury, I do think it's fair, and I do like pointing out that no man is an island, or no person is an island. And while Fury has guarded himself both professionally and personally, nobody gets that far in life without some help. And Fury has had plenty of help from some very unexpected places. Even without Skrulls, the spy game is about relationships, as evidenced by his needing help from Sonya this episode. And I like the Nick Fury eye patch that she put on her owl, by the way. Although, why couldn't she be bothered to stop World War III? She was like, nah, it's not a good time for me. I'm having some of my own issues. And I'd be like, Sonya, World War III, make the call. Can't you stop that sub or pull the plug on it somehow? So let's see what happens. As I said, we're only halfway done. Although we are halfway done, interestingly. This seems like we're only a third of the way done, quite frankly. I sure hope Talos makes it out of this show alive. I got that thought while I was writing my notes, and now I'm scared, because I love Talos so much. And Ben Mendelsohn sure needs the work. And I'm excited to see some real Super Skrull action. This very low budget again, like these little small teases. Although, the fact that they salvaged something from Iron Man 3, you kind of have to respect that. That's kind of awesome. And then also, as I think about it, with Super Skrulls, what is the MCU going to do with the Skrulls after this show? Will they all get shipped off to the planet of their dreams? They're like, oh, my bad, here's one. But how do you make a shape-shifting Super Skrull who's super-powered and can then disappear into a crowd leave Earth if they don't want to? Especially, again, when your show can't afford to bring in the Avengers. And you have so many movies planned on the horizon that you certainly couldn't address it in a movie anytime soon. This show leaves so many questions, right? Some intentionally and some unintentionally. But so far, particularly with today's episode, it is getting by with the charisma of its stars. Mostly Samuel L. Jackson, Ben Mendelsohn, and Olivia Colman. That is quite the trio. And while I do think that outside of the show, Kingsley Ben-Adir and Emilia Clarke are very talented, I think here, talk about super, they are super underwhelming. And what a waste of Shooter McGavin. It must have been so weird for him to film that portion when he was in this Skrull cold storage. And they're like, it's comic book stuff, man. And he's like, okay. All right, so what did you think of today's episode? And what questions do you have? And what do you think the answers will be? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.